Shift Happens podcast.
Welcome to the Shift Happens podcast, where we explore the latest trends and technologies transforming the future of work. As AI and automation reshapes how we move, work, and live, one question stands out. Can we design autonomous systems that earn our trust while improving the human experience? Today, we're joined by Michael Kelly, Chief Strategy Officer of Mozee. Michael's team is proving that autonomous cars are the present, and they're already making transportation safer, more efficient, and more human-centered. In this episode, we'll explore the real-world impact of autonomous vehicles, the importance of trust and safety, and how these innovations in mobility are shaping the future of our cities. Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Shift Happens podcast. And today, I'm so excited to be speaking with Michael, and we're going to talk a lot about autonomous mobility, AI, and really the future of transportation. So Michael, welcome to Shift Happens.
Hey, it's great to be here. Thank you for having me.
Well, before we jump right into all this cool conversation we're going to have, I ask every single guest, what song best defines change and transformation to you, and why?
I love the song Feeling Good.
And I'm feeling good.
Because it's about change, but it's also it's the positive nature of change, right? Change is a natural component of life, and so it should be embraced. And so that song to me really kind of encompasses that, because it's hard to be in a bad mood listening to that song.
Especially the Michael Bublé rendition, right?
Exactly. That's my favorite one.
Yeah. Well, speaking of change, maybe we start from the beginning here. What brought about the change from being in finance, moving to this industry? What got your interest, and what excited you the most?
Yeah. So I'm an entrepreneur at heart. My entrepreneurial background dates back to 2005, before I ever was in finance. And ultimately, my friend is who started this company. And, I've invested in just about every asset class. And to me, this was actually the most attractive investment I've ever seen. And so with that, I decided to invest my hands and feet and everything in between, and do what I can to help make this company successful.
I mean, being in finance and an entrepreneur, I'm sure you've seen a lot of companies out there. You invest in a lot, and to say that this is the best and the most positive investment you made must be something big. So for our listeners, can you provide a quick background of what Mozee is all about, and what you're solving for, and why you believe in the company?
Absolutely. I can really distill it down to something really quick and easy. We believe in building safer and more connected communities, right? And in a world where we feel more disconnected than ever, it's really, really important, coming out of COVID especially, right? Like, we're still learning the impacts that's going to have for decades on our kids that lived through that, even adults who lived through that. It's a science experiment I think all of us wish never happened. And so, how do we become more connected as a society? How do we feel safe again in our communities? The whole idea of a Western world was this idea that we could all work together in a safe environment, not have to worry about, getting randomly attacked and by barbarians, to use words in the age before Western society existed, right? And ultimately, it feels lost, even if violence isn't even at its peak. We're exposed to it so much these days. And so, how do we get back to safer, more connected communities where people can really live their lives, have families, right? And work hard and provide value to society? I think that's ultimately the future world that we would like to live in, right? And I think it's happening. I think there's a lot to be excited about, and that's really what our focus is. We like to say we're a software company that just so happens to be focused on transit right now, and so because we think that is the place that we can have the biggest impact in terms of, building that future.
I mean, I love this vision you painted, like you said, right? It's happening. I'm seeing a lot of initiatives going on. So, for example, I came across this project in Arizona where they're building this city, ironically, with no transportation, but everybody's so connected between living and working, and it's this idea of, in an ironic way, just going back to how it was, right? Where there's always a town square, people got together, we shared meals, neighbors looking after each other, and this movement towards that, especially here in the United States, I think is happening in different pockets.
Absolutely. You talk to a lot of developers, and we've been seeing this for a little while, where people are starting to live, work, and play in the same area. How do you create those random collisions? I think, our head of partnerships told me the story. He spent a little bit of time living in New York City, and this story really resonated with me. He said, what's beautiful about New York City is it doesn't matter if you're a hedge fund manager or, a construction worker, they might be sharing the same subway. And the story he told was it was a subway ride from the airport into the city, about 45 minutes. And you had this traveler and a construction worker who had just gotten off work, and they were both sitting next to each other on the subway, and they heard this rattling, and they looked down, and it was an unopened wine bottle that was just kind of rolling around, and there was nobody around besides them. And so the construction worker picked it up, looked at it, showed it to the traveler. Traveler kind of gave a nod, and then they shared some wine together. It's really difficult to find random collisions like that where people from different worlds can share a moment together. And we're trying to create more of that in more spaces. So we like to say that, cities were built around one of two things, either mass transit or the American car. And how do we take, this New York City, shared transit, flavor it with autonomy, and reclaim space for people and not cars? And that's really what kind of drives a lot of our motivating factors. And, we're talking to quite a few communities and actually cities that we never even would have thought to outreach to. They called us, and talking about how do we create this town square, as you said it earlier. How do we build a system that allows for these random occurrences to occur, and people feel comfortable and safe being a part of the community, in the community, around other people, and allow for these occurrences to happen. And yeah, I mean, that's exactly what we're looking to help build. And it's going to take a lot of work, but that's why it's worth doing.
So for your first, I would say, project or initiative coming up, because this is a tall order, right? So you got to start somewhere. How do you foresee this mode of autonomous transit or smart transportation taking shape and happening? Can you paint a picture and specific example of what this would look like?
Absolutely. I think it's always important to begin with the end in mind, right? And so what we imagine is a shared, coordinated system that allows for free flowing through a city, right? And we think that's necessary. And so, how do we start with that? How do we begin? How do we work towards that? And ultimately, I think what it is by taking a small piece of the existing system, understanding where the gaps are, help fill that gap, and use it as an opportunity to show how an entire system could work, right? And so, when we think about both, how humanity changes, both how, markets move, all of these important components that have to come into play. We like to say that it took the average person 50 years to become comfortable with a self-driving elevator. So our initial vehicle is almost like a horizontal elevator. It's a really simple and easy way for people to experience autonomy. Our software is far more powerful and can solve far more difficult tasks. But not everyone lives in Silicon Valley and is ready to jump in a self-driving vehicle on a highway, right? And so, we're really focused on short distances, kind of first and last mile, multi-passenger, our vehicles hold 10 to 12 people, and lower speeds, right? So it's really, really the safest way for people to experience autonomy, and it solves a huge problem in the current system, right? I mean, the areas where we're jumping in are spaces that maybe are a little too big to walk, right? But you would never call an Uber for, right? It's too short to call an Uber, and that's really where our bread and butter is on our initial release is filling those gaps, partnering with cities, partnering with businesses, and partnering with developers to actually fill that gap. And then once we're able to show what a coordinated system, how it can operate, how it can act in this small environment, we'll then be given the opportunity and the permission to take on harder challenges, both by cities and businesses, but also by passengers.
Right. I mean, there's two things I'd love to unpack, right? Number one, there's mixed feelings around autonomous driving, as you know, between what Tesla's been doing, Waymo, and even the innovations in the other side of the world. Depending on who says it and what happens, it may be good, it may be bad. How have you all overcome that people be accepting of a self-driving, AI-driven autonomous vehicle?
It's a really great question. I don't know that it's on us to try to go around, and there's nothing I can say to make somebody believe or be willing to accept. I kind of gave the analogy of a self-driving elevator. It took 50 years, right? We wanted that elevator attendant there, even though they weren't doing anything, right? Maybe they were just pressing the button. We're kind of trying to learn from that, right? So we don't use telecommunications like Waymo and Tesla uses to have the human in the loop, which is a regulatory requirement. We do still have a person in the vehicle. We like to call them our safety steward. They're kind of the mobile concierge. They help somebody who maybe is in a wheelchair, right? They know CPR. They're the first person there if there is an issue that needs to. Yeah, exactly. We train them in verbal jujitsu so they can help de-escalate situations and things of that sort. But more importantly, they're the friendly face on the vehicle that helps you feel comfortable because they're the elevator attendant that's there with you along the ride, right? And so we think these are really important, necessary steps to train people to become comfortable with the technology, to actually take that first step and experience a short distance, low speed ride with your elevator attendant there that takes you from point A to point B, right?
Got it. So for our listeners, I'm sure a lot of our folks don't even realize once upon a time there's an elevator attendant, but I remember that growing up. I'm like, I don't want this job, like all day long, elevator pressing buttons.
Absolutely. And the beauty of it is in our vehicles, nobody sits behind you. It's very community style seating, kind of, right? And so because our safety steward can focus on our passengers, they can focus on making sure that not only people feel safe, but also they can be there to answer questions, right? So if we're partnering, let's say with a sports team, we actually allow for that sports team to cross train the safety stewards. So maybe there's the game day experience starts before you ever get into the stadium, or maybe it's a historical district, right? And the person can be trained to be that person that talks through, hey, look over here, this is what happened, so on and so forth. So they actually become a huge asset as well. They're not just somebody who's sitting there quiet and it's a little awkward that they're even there because there has to be this human in the loop. No, they're an asset that we train and make sure that they're upskilled to be able to handle these situations. And then also, hey, it's a cool thing. People are going to ask questions about the technology, or they're going to ask questions about the vehicle, right? And so they're there to be able to answer those questions.
So for this initial rollout, what type of organizations and partnerships have you formed? I can see certainly cities or even universities, right? Like big campuses or massive corporations with campuses elsewhere. Are those the type of profile organizations you're working with?
That's exactly right. I would throw in airports and hospitals, right? But anybody with a large campus where you have to move people around, again, you don't necessarily want to walk. Maybe, some people can't walk the distance, but you wouldn't take an Uber to the other side. It's exactly right. University campuses, hospitals, airports, city entertainment districts, large corporate campuses.
And what would be the monetization model look like? Is it something that the passengers pay for, or in conjunction with the city or the organization? How does that work?
It's a great question. If a passenger is being charged for the ride, they are not being charged by us. So we work directly with the city or the business or the airport. They le- they lease the vehicles from us. We operate, right? So the safety steward is our employee, and we come in and we just operate. If, however, whoever it is that we are leasing to, if they want to charge for rides in order to recoup some of their costs, they can, right? What does that look like? You're probably looking more like city bus prices versus, a robo taxi or a taxi, right? And so even in those instances, you're still looking at much lower costs because, we are having 10 to 12 passengers at a time. It's not, one passenger for one ride. So the economies of scale actually help drive that price down. Um, but yeah, if you are being charged, then it's not by us. One of the examples that I would give you is we are in talks with a very large airport just to move employees around, actually. And so, they're not going to charge their employees.
Got it. I can also think of now, as you're describing, like theme parks, for example, right? Oh, this will be perfect for theme parks because, I remember taking my kids to theme parks in Florida, and they do have trams. I mean, it's cool, but again, I think this would be perfect for it.
Absolutely. And again, we can do some really cool experiential stuff in there. And so, to be able to start your Disney experience before you ever get into the park, absolutely.
Now, since this is autonomous self-driving, it's powered by AI. Tell me more about how your technology is different or similar to all the AI technologies out there that's used in transportation.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, so, the technology that Waymo and Tesla has is fantastic, right? I mean, especially when you consider how far they've come since 2015. I mean, the industry really has come a long way. We are very different, though. We set out with the purpose of building the safest autonomous system on the planet. And we think we're well on that route. Um, there's a couple of different differentiators. What hardware are you using to process things? What sensors are you using to pull in data from what's happening around the vehicle? And then how do you make decisions, right? The driver, right? And so we are actually really different on pretty much all of those fronts from any other autonomous vehicle out there. One of the main contentions, and I would say we're closer to Tesla than we are anybody else in terms of, if you were to try to pair things up, because everyone else uses LiDAR. We do LiDAR. Tesla does not use LiDAR, right? And ultimately, we actually tested with LiDAR in the beginning, but because our perception system is so powerful, it provided no value at all to us. And so we dropped it. But we do use, as we like to say, our CEO is Elon crazy, but not Elon crazy. And that's not a shit at Elon, but we do use some redundant sensors because sun can blind the camera, or it's really foggy. We wanted to make sure that we have some extra safety there, so we do use infrared and 4D on the vehicles because those can really kind of cut through that noise. And from a sensor perspective, that's how we're a little bit different. From a hardware perspective, our system is very, very efficient. Waymo's, their entire trunk is filled with computers. I think Elon just announced that their next set of hardware, they're actually multiplying the amount of computers they're using by 8 times. And yeah, we can run the entire system on just one computer. Um, and so from a scalability and efficiency perspective, we're very advanced on that point. And then, you have to go into the intelligence layer. How does it understand the world around it? And this is something that Tesla has really, really done a fantastic job on, especially considering that they only use camera, right? And this is the point where I would say we're closer to Tesla because both Tesla and both us and Tesla use an end-to-end neural net, but we take things a little bit further because our AI is built fundamentally different than theirs. So we're capturing a lot more context than they are, which just empowers us to take into account more information. And so, for example, if um, somebody is walking along the side of the road and they're not paying attention to where they're going, our system knows that. And so let's be extra careful around them. Or the other big differentiator for us is our system is far faster than anyone else. And so, when you're looking at decision making, how fast can you make a decision? That's really important to safety. And so our system is a lot faster than than anybody else that we're aware of. Maybe somebody has a system that's not public, but um, and then the last piece to that is we don't use any connectivity. And so everything happens on device on the vehicle. We don't need to connect it to large data sets. And so, why is that important? Anybody who's ever operated a cell phone in a downtown setting knows why that's important, right? And so, so that's a huge thing for us. How do you operate even in contested environments like traffic or battlefield, right? And so, our system operates fully on the edge with no connectivity.
Got it. So there's you must have a small language model running in the system within the vehicle.
Yeah, so it's not a language model, which would be kind of a pretty common misconception, right? So language model, think of, like ChatGPT is a large language model. You're referencing a small language model where you're trying to be more focused, right? But language models are more for more like dictionary type usage, right? Yeah, this is a vision model, right? And so, yeah, let's just say there's multiple scientific discoveries that were required to be able to do what we are able to do. And so that ours is pretty unique.
It's pretty exciting. I mean, especially the part where it's disconnected. That is very special, right? Because the reality is you may lose connectivity, even though at the most connected places with all the different factors, right? Power, weather, or the company going down.
I'll throw in another wrinkle, right? If somebody were to hack that connection, right? There's a lot there to pay attention to, and I'm not in the inner workings of these other autonomous companies. I'm sure they have things in place to try to protect against things like that. But that's something I worry about, right? Is could somebody hack into a system and then just drive that vehicle in a place that's not supposed to be? And ours, technically, we do have connection on our vehicles, but that's for routing. That's for passenger entertainment. We air gap the actual brain away from that, and so you would not be able to actually take control of the vehicle if you were to hack.
Now, Michael, looking ahead, right? Like 5 to 10 years, what does Mozee expect to be the biggest shift in mobility? I mean, y'all are a part of it now, and how should leaders prepare for this future?
Yeah, I mean, I think autonomy's here. I think that's the big one that's going to be really obvious for people to see is it's not going anywhere, and you're going to see it more and more and more. I think especially you're going to see a huge push in the robo taxi space, right? Which is going to be really interesting to see. We have concerns about the impact robo taxis are going to have without something like us jumping in. So the difference between rideshare generally, I'd put robo taxi in there, is you end up with about 35% of what's called dead miles, where the vehicle's driving around with no passenger. And, if you and I are going to meet ducks, right, like we're each going to order our own ride share. So we actually didn't reduce the amount of vehicles on the road. You actually increase the vehicles on the road. But you add in a system like ours where, on average, we're pulling anywhere from 4 to 8 vehicles off the road. Now you can actually build efficiency in the system. And then I actually think the robotaxi category has a lot more value, right, in that environment. And so, there's not competition there. I actually think that there's going to be a lot in terms of working together, again, to build that coordinated system. And so, I think 5 years, all you're going to do is you're just going to start seeing more of this stuff. There's a lot of people get really excited about technology and they think that it's going to happen faster than it is going to happen. I like to think of the internet bubble. Everyone thought the internet was going to change the world, and it took longer, but then it changed the world a lot more than they ever imagined. That's going to be that's the same thing here, right? So I think in 5 years, you're just going to see a lot more autonomous vehicles. I think in, maybe 10, 15 years, you're really going to start seeing a dramatic shift. I will say in 5 years, I think you're going to see some cities where you're going to have some really cool autonomous systems working, but only some people are going to get that exposure.
Yeah, I can see again in cities like New York, for example, right? I'm guilty of it. I travel all the time and I get my own Uber. I'm gonna meet with Chris and he's on maybe Upper East Side. I'm in downtown, but we have our separate Uber. So imagine a transportation solution like yours, going up and down or across different avenues. That would reduce a lot of vehicles on the road.
Absolutely, especially if our thing is if it's going literally the same route every single time, then it still actually reduces that value. Our system is actually designed to dynamically reroute at time based off what's happening on the ground. And so when you have a system that has that capability that is coordinated, then you can really do some interesting things. And then add into the fact, going back to the safety component in the community, if there is a scenario, let's just say, so last year there was a natural gas leak in the city of Fort Worth that exploded. And you can't really smell natural gas, and it happened downtown. A lot of people there. That's very scary, and so we're actually putting sensors on our vehicles that track particulates in the air that are very, very small. And so if one of our vehicles were to, for lack of a better word, sniff that there was a natural gas leak, we can now actually reroute the whole system. We don't want to be bringing people into that natural gas leak, right? We actually want to get people out of that scenario, and then also send an immediate alert to authorities, so that way we can, start activating systems to help alleviate the potential scenario of an explosion and get people out of harm's way, right? And so when you have a system that is informed and coordinated, those are things that you can actually do, right? Versus sending an alert and hoping that every independent party makes the right decision on their own, and it makes it really difficult, right, to do that. And so those are the types of problems that we're really interested in solving. It's not just about making a vehicle move by itself. It's much more than that.
100%. It's really far beyond transportation, right? Because in that example, it's really monitoring every aspect while it's moving across different vehicle as a whole system. How are you dealing with regulatory hurdles in cities, and every city's different? Or is this a blocker? Maybe I'm thinking it's a blocker, or it's not.
It's a great question. It's something that's probably going to change over time, right? Right now, it has not been an issue for us, mostly because we're in Texas. Texas is very friendly to this environment. And because our vehicle's operating all on device, we're not storing, facial information or anything like that from people that it's operating around. So from like a data perspective, we're not impeding on anyone's privacy or anything from that standpoint. It's so around the regulatory self-driving framework. We actually have regulators. Like some of them are even telling us we don't want the safety steward in the vehicle. Like go right, and we're like, no, we would prefer to have them in there at least currently, right? And so regulatory as of now has been the least of our issues. As a matter of fact, Sean, our CEO, is looked at as one of the leading minds in the entire space. So he actually is the only non-government official who sits on the autonomous vehicle task force for the state of Texas, that helps suggest policy, land, air, and sea on anything that moves autonomously in the state of Texas. And so, from that perspective, we actually haven't had any issues yet. That doesn't mean we won't, our thing is, look, we partner with cities, we partner with the regulators, right? What do you want us to prove? What do you want us to show, right? We feel very comfortable in the fact that we can do things no other autonomous vehicle can. And so if you want us to help make the standard that would put everyone else out of business, and that's not our goal either. We need the category to grow. We'll never outgrow the category, and you need other players in the category, right? And so but from our perspective, right, like, we're not scared of that. And so we welcome it, and so far we haven't had any issues.
Shift Happens Podcast. Shift Happens Podcast.
Well, Michael, this has been a really, really good conversation. We can keep going on. But before we wrap up, for our listeners, what practical lessons or stories you can share from cities already doing this and the impact it has on everybody's day-to-day life?
Yeah, cities are really, really one of the things that I think was a positive insight for me is cities really do care, about their citizens, and how do we help improve their lives, and how do we do that in a way that's meaningful. They're very slow, right? Until there's a problem, and then they'll move really quickly. But I think that's been the biggest eye-opening thing to me. And if I'm answering this question to an audience of an entrepreneur who is looking to get into the space of working with cities and stuff like that, what I would say is the key is find an internal champion in that city who really believes in what you're doing, right? Because that's what it takes. Because what happens is, your folder sits on somebody's desk underneath a whole bunch of other folders, and it sits there until there's a reason to move it to somebody else's desk, right? And so when you have an internal champion inside of these cities, which we've been very blessed to have that, you have that person that's going, where is that folder? Why is it still on this desk? It needs to go to the next desk. And that's been really helpful for us. So I would say, in terms of if anybody who's trying to do business with cities, that's really the key. The other thing too is, don't come in as if all of their problems. Come in with a wedge that you think, hey, I think this solves a really big problem for you, but I really want to understand more on how you view this. Is this a priority for you right now? What are your priorities, right? And then try to show efficient value. One of the reasons why we've gained such traction that we have is because we're not just moving people, right? The fact that we're actually contributing to public safety and providing a service that moves people, like, the cities see that and they say, oh, I can create efficiency in my budget, because the budget is a big deal right now with cities, right? And so, how can you provide value without becoming a huge strain on their budget? And thinking in those terms, I think, would be really helpful.
That's awesome. And hopefully one of these days, when I get to write your Mozee, we'll see that wine bottle moving around. So for folks who wants to maybe see it or try it today, where is it available?
Yeah, so only on some private campuses right now, so it's not open to the public. But I would encourage, if anybody goes to www.mozeealong.com, MOZEE along.com. We've got some cool stuff on there, including a blog that now talks about how we see the future, right? That just got, I think, uploaded yesterday. So if you want more insight in terms of the future we're trying to create and how we view the problems, you can see it on there. And then also our Instagram account, Mozee_official. You'll get to see a lot of content on there. You'll get to see it driving around. For some lucky people, we took it down to South by Southwest in Austin and drove it around town and gave people random rides and stuff like that. We're always looking for feedback. And so there's not a place to go right now that you're like, oh, I get to try it, but you might get lucky.
There you go. Well, Michael, thank you. Thank you so much. And one of these days, if I come down to Dallas, I'll hit you up. Maybe I get a free ride.
There we go. Yeah, I love it. Let's do it.
Shift Happens Podcast.
Thanks for tuning in to Shift Happens. Michael's vision shows that autonomy creates the most value when it solves real gaps, like those too short to Uber or too far to walk trips. Beyond self-driving tech, autonomous transit is about building safer, more connected, and more human-centered cities. This is how autonomy begins to drive real progress. Until the next time.
Shift Happens Podcast. Shift Happens Podcast.